Many years ago, in a beautiful city called Enugu, there lived a young woman called Chiamaka. Chiamaka was a trader. She sold cooked food at Ogwete market. And with the little money she got, she used it in supporting her husband Ebuka in running their home. Ebuka was a mechanic and was very responsible. He loved and adored his wife Chiamaka and their only child Chika. Their home was one filled with love, laughter, and joy. Ebuka and Chiamaka had looked for a child for several years and had given birth to Chika after 7 years of waiting. So it was no surprise that they poured all their love and affection on their only son, Chika. And even though Chiamaka was just a food vendor and her husband Ebuka was a mechanic at Ogwete market, they sent Chika to the best school in Enugu, a school where children of bankers, doctors, lawyers, and politicians attended. They were hell-bent on giving Chika the very best, so much so that they were willing to go over and beyond. Chika, on the other hand, was a very smart and intelligent boy and made his parents very proud. He did not allow their sacrifices they did to send him to the school where the elites attended go to waste. Chika was very popular in his secondary school, not just because he was intelligent, but because he was also well-mannered. His school, Bridgeton College, loved him and he always represented his school in national competitions and he always brought back the trophy home. Many of his classmates' parents always bought a gift for him and would always speak to their children and encourage them to befriend Chika so that Chika would have a positive influence on them. Chika was a star boy in all ramifications. His school loved him, his teachers loved him, his classmates loved him, and even his classmates' parents loved him. Chika was always welcomed in any of his friends' houses, as his friends' parents wanted him to befriend their children because they saw him as a good influence. So although Chika was not from a rich home, he hung around his rich friends most of the time. Chiamaka and Ebuka were so proud of their son, especially for the man he was slowly becoming. They knew his future was definitely bright the way things were going. However, as Chika spent more time with his wealthy friends and their families, he became very much aware that his family was poor and he began to get very ashamed of his family. He was already in SS2 by this time and no longer followed his father to his mechanic shop to help out even during holidays just because he was ashamed of his parents and the jobs they did to put food on the table and send him to school. He would always tell his father that he wanted to study for his upcoming exams whenever his father asked him to follow him to his workshop. And then his father would let him be because Chika was actually very intelligent. During the holidays, he would spend most of his time in the homes of his wealthy friends under the guise that he was studying, and his parents would allow him as they felt that it was good for him to keep company with the elites. And things continued like this for a very long time. 1 year later, Chika had graduated from secondary school and had 9 distinctions in one sitting, and this made his parents very proud. Chika had told his parents that he wanted to become a medical doctor, and they were in full support. They knew that he had the brains for it and had given him their full support. Chiamaka and her husband had been saving money for Chika's university education since he was born, and they had saved a substantial amount and were looking forward to Chika becoming a medical doctor someday. However, tragedy struck Chiamaka's home one fateful day. Chiamaka was at the market one day selling food to her customers when she heard loud screams, Mama Chika, come on, your house is on fire. So men and women called out to her frantically. Ha, fire ke? How can my house be on fire? Chiamaka thought to herself in a quick second, and then she remembered that her husband and her son were both at home. That day, Ebuka did not go to his workshop because he was feeling sick, and Chika, their son, was at home because he had written JAMB and was waiting to receive his admission letter. Chiamaka quickly dashed off, leaving everything behind. As she ran to her house, she kept on screaming, "Chimo, Ebuka, Chika, Chimo, Chukubiko Zienu, please." Chiamaka screamed as she ran to her house. On getting to her home, Chiamaka saw her house burning, and she was told that her husband had been rescued but was already burnt and had also been taken to the hospital, but that her son Chika, her only child, was still inside and was trapped, and that they were waiting for the firefighters to come and stop the fire and rescue Chika. Chiamaka, not minding that she could get burnt, refused to wait for the firefighters to come. She knew that if she did not do something now, that her only child, Chika, would be dead in a matter of minutes. So against the advice of everyone present, she took a blanket and ran into the fire. As she entered into the burning house, she could hear her son banging hard on the door. "Help, help, somebody help me." Chika screamed, already losing his strength. And immediately, Chiamaka, with all the strength left in her, pushed the door down and entered into her son's room and hugged him tightly. Chika was so happy to see his mother. He thought he was going to die in the fire that day. And when they were about to leave, that was when it dawned on Chiamaka that she had brought only one blanket, which she had used all this while to cover herself so that the fire would not touch her. Now she realized that she should have brought two, one for herself and one for her son. But immediately her motherly instinct kicked in and she used the blanket to wrap her son so he doesn't get burnt. And then she held her son and led him out of the fire while the fire burnt her flesh. Immediately they got outside the burning house. Chiamaka fell to her knees and fainted. Her neighbors quickly carried her and rushed her to the hospital. By this time, her whole body had been burnt and her flesh had even started peeling. Chika just sat on the floor weeping and crying like a baby. The fire outbreak had been his fault. He had gone to the kitchen to cook indomie. Indomie noodles was his favorite due to its great taste. He practically ate indomie noodles all day. Chika had already turned the gas on but had not yet struck the matchstick when he heard his phone ring. So he immediately abandoned the gas that he had already turned on and ran to check who was calling him. So when Chika went to his room and saw that it was his girlfriend in school called Princess that was calling him, he picked the call and she broke the good news to him that she had seen his name on the admission list, that Chika had gotten admission into the University of Nigeria to study medicine. Chika was so happy, and out of excitement, he continued speaking with Princess for hours, forgetting that he had already turned the gas on, although he hadn't struck a matchstick yet. But the gas had already leaked and was smelling round the whole house. But because Chika was carried away with his phone call, he did not perceive the smell of gas around the house. A few minutes later, his father Ebuka, who had stayed back home that day because he was sick, went to the kitchen to put water on fire to make tea for breakfast, but did not perceive the gas leak in the kitchen because Ebuka had a medical condition called anosmia, which meant that he had lost his sense of smell and could not perceive anything at all, be it perfume, be it food, be it fat, or even a gas leak. So immediately Ebuka struck the matchstick. There was an explosion and everywhere caught fire. So that was how Chika's negligence had led to the fire outbreak. Chika simply sat on the floor, weeping and crying. He knew that he was the cause of the fire outbreak, but was too afraid to tell anyone. Meanwhile, Chiamaka was scarred beyond recognition and was in the hospital fighting for her life. Ebuka, on the other hand, was already dead. Chika had to start living with his neighbors for the time being. He wept and wept all day. A few weeks later, Chiamaka was a bit more stable, and Chika had gone to visit his mother at the hospital. Immediately he saw her. He began to cry and say, "Mama, please forgive me. The whole fire outbreak was my fault. I was the one that turned on the gas, forgetting that Papa has anosmia. Now see what I have done to your face. Please, Mama, forgive me," Chika said, crying. "It's okay. It's not your fault, my son. Anyone could have made the mistake of leaving the gas on. Please do not punish yourself like this. Please, Chika," Chiamaka said, trying to console her son. "But Mama, see your face now. It should have been me. It should have been me that should have been disfigured like this. Yet I have no mark on my body, but you're full of scars. And your face is burnt because you sacrificed your blanket for me instead. I am so sorry, Mama. This is all my fault. This should never have happened," Chika said, continuing to weep. "Stop, Chika, stop. I have told you it's okay. It is not your fault, and I'm not complaining about how I look. It's better that my face is destroyed beyond recognition than for any harm to befall you. You're my only child, and I love you to death. And I will not only give my face for you, but even my life. It's okay," Chiamaka said reassuringly, while trying to comfort her weeping son, Chika. So Chiamaka and Chika spent a few weeks together at the hospital. And that was when Chika informed his mother, Chiamaka, that he had gotten admission into the University of Nigeria to study medicine. Chiamaka was so excited. So I will be Mama Doctor. God, thank you, Chiamaka said happily. A few months later, Chiamaka was discharged from the hospital and they moved into a new house. However, Chiamaka became very sad. She did not like the way she looked at all. She knew that she did not want to live her life looking the way she was and having her face scarred beyond recognition. So one day, she went to the hospital and spoke to the doctor saying, "Doctor, please, is there anything that can be done to reduce the burns and scars on my face at least? Please, I don't want to live my life like this. Please help me," Chiamaka said, crying. "Please calm down. I completely understand how you feel. And yes, there is a procedure that can help you reduce the appearance of the scars from the burns over time. But it can be done," the doctor replied. Thank God though. Thank you, doctor. Doctor, but please, like how much will this procedure cost? Chiamaka asked hopefully. "Well, I can't give you a particular amount, but I know you'll be needing somewhere between 15 to 20 million naira. And this procedure must be started as soon as possible if you want it to be really effective," the doctor replied. Doc, 15 to 20 million naira? Where am I supposed to get that kind of money from? Doctor, Chiamaka said, crying. So over the next few days, Chiamaka was very sad. She was in deep thoughts. She knew that she did not want her face to remain scarred for life. She had some money, a substantial amount somewhere. She and her husband had saved the sum of 18 million naira for Chika's university education. They had started putting a little money aside every week since the day Chika was born for his university education, as they wanted him to have a much more better life and future than they both had. And over time, the money that they saved plus the interest had accumulated to the sum of 18 million naira. But now, with the way her face was, Chiamaka was torn between using the money for the procedure to restore her face or using the money for Chika's university education, since he had already secured his admission into the university to study medicine. But after giving it several thoughts, Chiamaka decided that her son's education was more important than her looks, so she decided to forfeit her looks for her son's education. Chika, on the other hand, was very worried. He did not know what he was going to do. He did not know what his fate was going to be, now that his father was dead and his mother was still recovering, and they had lost most of their properties. He did not know whether his mother was going to be able to afford his university education, and he did not want to speak to his mother about it for fear that he might be putting too much pressure on her. But unknown to him that his parents had saved money for years for his university education. So Chika decided to start visiting all his friends' houses, whose parents liked him and had welcomed him into their home before now, to beg them to please support him in any way they could. But Chika was shocked to his bone marrow at the number of rejections that he received from the same people who had willingly welcomed him into their homes prior to now. Even his girlfriend Princess broke up with him after she had heard all that had happened to his family, as she did not want him to become a burden on her. Chika was so devastated and sad. He realized that success had many friends. Chiamaka, on the other hand, was having a fair share of her own unfortunate incidents, as she noticed that after she resumed selling food at the markets, that nobody bought food from her restaurant again. She had even heard one or two of her customers whispering about her, saying that her body irritated them and so they could not eat at her restaurant. Most of her customers had even gone over to her competitor, Mama Ada, to eat at her restaurant, even when they knew for a fact that her food was way better than Mama Ada's food. It even got so bad that even men and women started laughing at her when she walked on the streets. Chiamaka was shattered. But what shattered her heart the most was the fact that even her own son, Chika, had already started showing signs of disgust and was even resenting her for her appearance. Each time she was talking to him, he tried as much as possible not to stare at her face, and when he did stare at her face, it was filled with so much disgust. Chiamaka's heart was broken. At this point, she seriously started contemplating using the money that she and her husband had saved for over 18 years for their son's education for her face instead. After all, Chika did not know about the money, and it was also her money as well. She knew that she could take strangers looking at her with disdain, but knew that she definitely couldn't take that same look from her own son. It was too much heartbreak. But after giving it so much thought, she still decided that her son's future was more important. So Chiamaka came up with an alternative plan instead. Chiamaka began to cover her face with a scarf so that only her eyes and mouth were revealed. And Chiamaka noticed that all her customers began to come back and began to patronize her again. Her restaurant was once again filled to the brim as it used to be before. She also noticed that her son began to be able to sit with her and have meaningful conversations for hours now that she covered her face with clothes at home. Chiamaka was so heartbroken, but happy that at least her son no longer resented her. A few months later, it was time to resume school, and Chika was so happy when his mother informed him that they had enough money to see him through the university. Chika was so grateful. "Thank you, Mom. God will bless you and Dad, and may his soul rest in perfect peace," Chika said excitedly. So Chika resumed at the university. He was so happy. So Chiamaka continued to pay for Chika's schooling and feeding while she continued to sell food at the markets. However, as Chika spent more years in school and as he began to make more friends who were also from wealthy homes, Chika became more ashamed of his mother. So when he and his friends discussed about their parents and shared their pictures of their parents and siblings, Chika was so ashamed of his mother and was scared that his friends would want to cut ties with him just the same way his secondary school friends had cut ties with him. So Chika told his friends that his parents had died and that he was an only child, and they all felt pity and remorse for him. So Chika no longer went home during the holiday season. Instead, he would call his mother and tell her that in medical school that they did not observe the holidays due to the workload. But his mom knew that she was lying, but she let it be. 6 years went by very quickly, and in 6 years at the university studying medicine, Chika only came back home about 2 times. He spent the rest of the other holidays at the homes of his rich friends. Chika was the best graduating student in his set, but rather than being excited, he was worried because he was ashamed of his mother and did not want her to attend his graduation ceremony, since he had already told everyone that his parents were dead. He did not know what to do, but one day came up with a plan. So the next time his mother called him to find out when his graduation day was, so she could attend and invite her friends, Chika lied to his mother and gave her a wrong date when he knew that the graduation ceremony would have been done and that he would have been long gone from school. So, Chika attended his graduation ceremony alone and won over 9 prizes. Barely 2 weeks later, Chika had gotten a hospital to do his internship in Lagos and then left Enugu without even telling his mother. And as soon as he arrived Lagos, he changed his SIM card just so that he could cut all ties with his mother because he was so ashamed of her and wanted to start life afresh without having his mother as a baggage. Meanwhile, Chiamaka had gone to Chika's school on the supposed day of graduation with her friends and coolers of food and drinks. But she got the shock of her life when she found out that the induction had taken place weeks back, and then it dawned on her that Chika had tricked her just so she wouldn't be able to attend his graduation ceremony. She was also unable to reach him on the phone as Chika had changed his number. Because Chika was popular on campus, everyone knew him. And when she asked a student about him, they told her that Chika got a very good job in Lagos and had already relocated. Chiamaka broke down, weeping and crying profusely. Over the next few weeks, Chika's betrayal had hurt his mother so deeply that she fell very sick. And for the next 2 years, Chiamaka had still not heard anything from Chika, and this broke her heart even more. She even aged overnight due to this heartbreak. She could no longer even go to the market to sell food as she was very sick all the time and she had spent all her savings on her treatments. Chiamaka had become poor and was now living at the mercy of her neighbors. Meanwhile, Chika was living large in Lagos and was now even married to a beautiful lady called Ifoma, and they even had a child. He was living his dream life and had forgotten all about his mother as he had cut ties with her. Few years down the line, Chika became really wealthy and one of the sought-out doctors in Lagos. He now even had a big hospital. His family had also grown as his wife had given birth to 3 beautiful sons for him. However, one day, Chika and his wife Ifoma were in the parlor having a good time when suddenly they heard a loud scream coming from their children's room. And immediately, they ran to their children's bedroom only to find their 3 sons collapsed on the floor. They had all passed out. Chika immediately fell to his knees as a doctor to check their pulse and administer some first aid before rushing them to the hospital. However, over the next few weeks, his sons, despite receiving the best medical treatment, were not responsive. They were unconscious. Chika ran all sorts of tests and did all sorts of scans, but they were still not responsive. For the first time in his life, Chika was truly afraid. He did not know what to do. His wife Ifoma, on the other hand, was so devastated, crying and weeping. Chika had invited some of his colleagues who were pediatric consultants to give a second opinion, but nobody could tell what the problem was or even proffer any solution. 2 months later, Chika's 3 sons were still unconscious. At this point, Chika became very desperate and started going from church to church, seeking a solution. And one day, Chika and Ifoma had gone to one church, and when the pastor was praying, he stopped immediately and said, "Young man, you're the one that brought this sickness on your children. Who is Chiamaka to you?" The pastor asked sternly, "Hey, men will stain your white, oh. So it's because of one useless mistress, Chiamaka, or whatever they call her name, that my children are in between life and death for how many months, eh?" Ifoma said, screaming at the top of her voice, "Oh, Ifoma, stop. Please stop. Ifoma, just stop. Chiamaka is not a mistress. Chiamaka is my mother." Chika replied sadly, "Your mother? Chika, is your mother still alive? But you told me that your parents were dead. And if she's still alive, how come you never talk about her? And why was she not at our wedding? And why has she not seen her grandchildren?" Ifoma replied, looking confused, Then Chika broke down in tears and narrated all that had happened to his wife and pastor. How he was so ashamed of his mother because of the scars from the fire that he had caused, and how he had cut all ties with her and disowned her, and came to Lagos without informing her just because he wanted to erase that part of his life. Ifeoma and the pastor were dumbfounded. How could you have been so mean to your mother? Okay, do you know where she is now? Ifeoma asked frantically. I'm so sorry, Ifeoma. I don't know where she is exactly, but I believe that she should still be in Enugu. Chika replied, bowing his head in shame. Young man, you must go and beg your mother for forgiveness. That is the only way your children will survive this, the pastor said to Chika. So the following day, Chika and Ifeoma traveled down to Enugu, and he went straight to his former house to look for his mother, but he didn't see her, but saw some of his neighbors that he recognized. And when he had asked about his mother, they told him that his mother became so poor and could not pay rent. So the landlord had thrown her things out, and now she lived by the roadside begging for money. Immediately, Chika began to weep. They went ahead and directed him to where he could find his mother. So a few minutes later, Chika had gone to where he was directed, and then he saw his mother seated on the bare floor, begging passers-by for money. Immediately his heart broke and he screamed, "Mama, Mama!" And immediately Chiamaka heard his voice. She turned and looked at him, tears dripping down her face. "Mama, I am sorry, please forgive me," Chika said, kneeling and crying. But Chiamaka refused to acknowledge her son. "Mama, biko zeno, forgive me, biko no." Chika continued crying, but Chiamaka did not acknowledge him. Immediately, Ifeoma, his wife, knelt down beside her husband, begging Chiamaka, but Chiamaka did not acknowledge any of them. They both stayed there for hours, yet Chiamaka would not acknowledge them. They sat down there with her and slept there on the road for 3 days and 3 nights before Chiamaka finally spoke up and said, "Chika, ewo, Chika, you broke my heart though. Chika, me, your mother, you abandoned me like that, eh? Chika, Chika, Chika," Chiamaka said, weeping. And Chika continued to beg his mother and said, "Mama, I am sorry, because Mama, I am your only child, biko forgive me, biko Mama," Chika said, crying. And Chika's words melted Chiamaka's heart. There was no way she could stay angry at her only child forever. So she forgave him and followed him back to Lagos. By the time they were getting to Lagos, his 3 children had recovered. Chika was so happy. He introduced them to his mother and told them that she was their grandmother. Chiamaka was so happy to see that she had grandchildren and was also happy to see that her son was very successful. Chika took very good care of his mother and stopped her from wearing scarf to cover her burns and scars, and began to make arrangements to fly her abroad so she can undergo a skin grafting surgery to reduce the appearance of the scars on her body. Chika also threw a very big party for his mother to honor her, and he invited all his friends and colleagues and apologized to his mother in their presence. Chiamaka was so happy. She was happy at last, living comfortably and enjoying the love of her only son and his family. Hi besties, it's your girl Omalicha again. Thank you so much for watching my story to the end. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one. If you were Chiamaka, Chika's mother, would you be able to forgive your son? Like, for the whole betrayal, first of all, that you got burnt was due to his fault. The money that you would have used to repair your face, you used it to send him to school, and he just abandons you like that. Do you think you will ever be able to forgive him in your life? Please share your thoughts with me in the comment section. I'd like to hear this one. And please support your homegirl Omalicha by subscribing to my channel, liking my videos, and sharing with your loved ones. Now until I come your way again with more interesting stories, bye!